Hi, I'm Veronica.
I'm Debbie. Nice to meet you. Okay, hi. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm a PhD student at the Life Sciences Department under the Division of Chemical Biology. I work with extracellular vesicles. So these are like nanoparticles released by cells for intercellular communication. And it has been found that they play important roles in cancer and cancer metastasis. So we're trying to characterize that in order to see if we can manipulate them for drug delivery and like therapeutics or diagnostics.
I am Veronica Flores. I'm a PhD student at Applied Chemistry in Chemistry department. I'm working studying the mechanical properties of doped conjugated polymers for the possible application in organic electronics. Being a PhD student feels really like a moment where you get to learn about a lot of things. And yeah, that you have the opportunity to learn about science and also about how to grow as a professional.
Yeah.
So, and also it's scary because you need to learn how to manage your project independently.
Yeah, so it's also like understanding and learning a lot of different techniques because I'm from a biology, chemistry background, but now I'm doing more biophysics. So that's a very new field for me. But then you get to learn a lot of techniques and also to troubleshoot some things. But also apart from like the science part, it's also more like as a personal development because then you learn how to manage your time effectively because you do experiments, but we also do teaching and then we also take courses. So there's a lot of overlapping things that you need to know which to prioritize, which ones you can do in the next weeks or so.
Since I was in my undergrad, I was interested on keep learning.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
then I entered my master, and I just saw PhD students when I was in my master, the type of work they were doing and what it involved.
Yeah.
And that they get to do experiments in the lab, and I thought that was exciting.
Yeah.
So I think that's why.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a cool scientist, like one of those people with a white coat doing cool stuff in the lab and doing like chemical reactions or like such things. And then that's why I started doing science in my bachelor's, continued it in my master's, and then I realized I like doing research a lot, like having this questions, like research questions, and then doing things in order to answer them. So it's just the pursuit of knowledge and being able to try different things and learning a lot of new things.
I think as well, like it was children's TV shows.
Yeah.
I remember one, it was called Mythbusters.
Okay.
That they said that this urban myth. And they did all of these cool experiments to prove it or disprove it.
Okay.
And I thought it was really interesting and fun to watch. And yeah, I always was on the internet looking for experiment for children in YouTube.
Yeah.
And then I was like just trying to make slime or bath bombs or I don't know, like anything that looked exciting.
Now that I'm the one doing research, now it's kind of like my time to maybe encourage like younger people or kids out there that, oh, this is what we're doing about science and this is cool. And but then you need to translate what you're doing into something that they can relate to, like without any prior knowledge about science. So I think that's also very cool.
They come to my mind like some teachers that I had while I was in my undergrad. I always approached to them just to ask them some questions, and they were always nice to me, and they were like solve my questions, right?
Yeah.
And I think looking at them was helpful for me because I think there was not much. I don't know, like it didn't. I mean, in a moment when you're growing up. You don't look for role models, they just appear if you're lucky, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think they didn't appear as much as I would have liked. But I think those female teachers were really helpful and really inspiring.
I think one of the most important figures for me growing up is Marie Curie. It's just, she won 2 Nobel Prizes, and she did a lot of like important work in an era wherein science is male dominated. So that for me takes courage and like perseverance in order to excel in a male dominated field before.
I think I remember when I was in high school that I have doubts if I should study like the undergrad that I choose. I think the reason of those doubts were because in my high school I was not all A's, all like a best grade student. I mean I was okay, but I was like average, I would say.
Yeah.
And I remember that I was embarrassed to tell my classmates that I wanted to study chemical engineering. Because that's supposed to be like a hard subject. I think in my classroom I was the only woman that studied engineering. All the other persons were like high grades and also men. And I was really like, oh, maybe I will not be able to like do it, right?
Yeah.
And I felt doubts there and also shame, like, oh yeah, I will not be able to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember that moment. That was really doubtful because my grades were not high. And I was, oh yeah, the only like smart, really high grades kids will do this, right?
Back home, my society is very patriarchal, I would say. So there are like roles assigned to gender. And one of them is that if you're a woman, you're kind of like, yeah, you study like in school until maybe like university, but then after that you're expected to do more like house-based roles, I would say. So when I was pursuing science, one of my fears is that maybe I'm taking up too much space. Maybe I should just, finish bachelor's and then do something else, like maybe build my own family or like focus on like family related matters as compared to pursuing your own career and building a name for yourself. But I think I'm really grateful to like the people around me and like other women that continued doing science after like bachelor's and then continued to master's and gained a PhD after, because then that made me realize that it's okay for me to take up space and be a good scientist and continue my journey in like scientific career, because then I can actually do both. Like there are people around me that are really good in like what they do in their careers, and they're also like good role models with their family and such. So I'm happy that that I did bachelor's, continued master's, and now I'm doing a PhD.
It has been more common for me to see that women tend to have less confidence and also doubt more themselves.
Yeah.
Instead of what is in within, it's like looking at our surroundings, right? Instead of like what you really want.
Yeah.
I think I've noticed also those things on myself. So yeah, I think well, at least for myself, it has been difficult to see those things and trying to modify them or like grow in that sense to be more confident or know what I want and then have self-respect and higher self-esteem. Yeah. And sometimes I think, oh, would I need to do this extra work if I were to be raised a male? Yeah. So I think that's a question that sometimes I ask myself, like how does it change, right?
I have experienced some of like the questioning part, and I have a friend in a very male-dominated field, and sometimes she also questions herself. So it's hard to speak up your opinions, especially if it's like a different opinion than someone else that's of the opposite gender, for example. So it takes like effort and courage to be firm with like, no, but this is what I think about it, even though that disagrees with like the opinion of like another male colleague, for example. And I've also experienced it that sometimes when we're doing like scientific discussions, that someone tries to explain things to me that I'm like, I also know that, but it's kind of like mansplaining that we're of the same level. So I also have the same knowledge as you are, so you don't need to, like talk to me as if I don't know much, because I also am in the same position as you.
Do you speak up when you're in a situation where something like this happens?
I think I sometimes do, sometimes I don't. It's like I feel like in a process of trying, right? Like sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's like a growth that is like this, at least for me. I struggle to be able to communicate effectively those boundaries, right? Or what it's upsetting me in that moment. So yeah, sometimes I feel that that's harder, sometimes it's easier.
I feel like as women, we tend to compromise more a bit or be more flexible with things that may not be the same for like male, for example. But yeah, it's good, as you've said, that we recognize that, okay, this happened, maybe the next time we try to speak up more and set firm boundaries.
It's just like things that I have noticed. For example, and I try to change. For example, if I have a lab practice, right, with some students, and it needs a group, and I always give the taking notes to the men, and then I give the practical one to the women, because I've seen that on teams where like it's mixed. The women tend to be the one taking the notes. I don't know why, because I've seen just an observation and this small sample that I've seen, right?
For me, I teach pharmacy, and I've noticed that I feel like the pharmacy, at least for the courses that I'm teaching, it's more female dominated, because there are like a few men in a class of like a lot of women. But also when it comes to, because they do things by pairs, and some of them are, it feels like if you're a guy, you pair up with a guy, and then if you're a woman, you pair up with a woman as well. It would be good to have like mixed pairings as well.
What would you say to someone that is thinking about applying to a PhD? What advice would you give them?
I think I will say that don't forget to cultivate as well your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Like don't abandon that. Like of course it's a lot about learning about science, and that's really rewarding and really fun. I will say, and also like get to know yourself and what do you want or what fulfills you, right? And yeah, I think it's totally worth it. And be kind to yourself, I would say as well.
Yeah.
Because at least. I will continue to make mistakes, right? Everyone will continue to make mistakes, and being okay with that and know and get back again, to not let them stop you. I think that's also important.
I would always say that doing a PhD can be challenging, but it's also very rewarding. You learn a lot of things in terms of science, like different techniques, different knowledge. You answer a lot of research questions, but also you get to know yourself with how do you work, how do you prioritize things, and you develop personal characteristics that will also be helpful not just in your PhD but also as you journey in life. And I also think that it's important to set boundaries in doing a PhD, because you will have a lot of responsibilities and maybe you cannot take all of them at once. So it's important to say no and take up space. Speak your mind, I would say, in a very respectful way, but know that you can take up space and be the person or the scientist you want to be. Yeah.
Yeah.